In the late 1980s and early 1990s, within the Soviet empire of evil, the movement for independence in individual republics became unstoppable. Intellectuals, dissidents, civic activists, and new generation politicians played key roles in the processes that accelerated the fall of the USSR and the establishment of a new Ukrainian state. On August 24, 1991, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine proclaimed the independence of Ukraine. Oksana Yakovlevna Meshko, a legend of the dissident movement and often called a person of resistance, did not live to see this event. She passed away in January 1991 at the age of 85. The fate of her family exemplifies the destruction of Ukrainian identity by the occupying Soviet authorities. Oksana Meshko was born in Poltava region into a farming family with Cossack roots, which had escaped serfdom and retained an indomitable spirit. Her father, Yakov Meshko, a gardener, was labeled a bourgeois element by the Bolsheviks in 1920, imprisoned without reason along with other hostages, and shot on Holodna Hora in Kharkiv, allegedly for the municipality's failure to fulfill the food tax. Her 17-year-old brother, Yevhen, an activist of enlightenment, director of an art and drama group, and a fighter in a rebel unit, was killed by a local Komsomol member. Their house was confiscated. Oksana, accused of coming from a socially hostile environment, was twice expelled from the Institute of Public Education in Dnipropetrovsk, but she fought for reinstatement and eventually earned her higher education. Her husband, institute teacher Fedor Serhiyenko, was arrested twice. For almost a year, she petitioned various Soviet institutions, even reaching the Prosecutor General of the Ukrainian SSR. As a result, the case was returned for further investigation, and 9 months later, Fedor Serhiyenko was released from prison.
Oksana Meshko was first arrested because she and her sister Vera were allegedly planning a terrorist attack on Nikita Khrushchev, the first secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Ukraine. The absurd accusations were marked by audacity and blatant cynicism. After 7 months of so-called investigation, the sisters were sentenced to 10 years in labor camps. Oksana Meshko was sent to Siberia, where she worked in the agricultural zone of Ukhta, cut stone near Irkutsk, and worked as a construction laborer. She later described the horrors of Stalin's concentration camps in her book, Between Death and Life. This is a Ukrainian woman's true story of the ugly world, created by an alien spirit, a violent ideology hostile to people. In the winter of 1978-79, the book was read on Radio Liberty, wrote Vasyl Ovsienko. In 1954, Meshko was released due to illness, but was required to settle in Siberia. 2 years later, she was able to obtain a passport and return to Ukraine. In 1972, Oksana Meshko's son, Oles, was imprisoned. 2 years later, he had been fired from his job for speaking at the funeral of the murdered artist, public figure, and human rights activist Alla Horska. After numerous searches, calls to the KGB, interrogations, and persistent efforts by Oksana Yakovlevna Meshko to alleviate the harsh conditions of her son in captivity, who was suffering from pulmonary tuberculosis, her statements, passionate and well-crafted, stood out for their legal knowledge, logical rigor, and moral conviction. These statements were exemplary of human rights journalism. It was not merely a mother's plea for her son, but a public battle for human rights against an entire evil empire.
In November 1976, along with Mykola Rudenko, Oles Berdnik, Levko Lukyanenko, Nina Strokata, and other Ukrainian human rights activists, Oksana Meshko joined the Ukrainian Public Group for promoting the implementation of the Helsinki Agreements. Such activism was met with persecution, constant provocations, and life under surveillance by the KGB. After Mykola Rudenko's arrest, Oksana Meshko effectively took over the coordination of the Ukrainian Helsinki Group's efforts. Her home was searched 9 times, and an armed attack of a burglar was staged at her doorstep, hoping to give an elderly lady a heart attack. On occasion, in order to get to the meetings, she had to exit her home through a window to avoid detection. Not only was I not afraid of anything anymore, but I believed that this was my civic duty and my purpose, Oksana Meshko wrote. Later, Oksana Meshko was put on trial as a particularly dangerous state criminal. Even her advanced age, 76 at the time, did not deter the authorities' punitive machine. She was sentenced to 6 months in a strict regime camp and 5 years in exile. Oksana was transported to her place of exile in Ayan, Khabarovsk Krai, on the shores of the Sea of Okhotsk, a journey that took 108 days. At that time, her son Oles was also in exile in Ayan, who was intentionally put to face a difficult choice. Here among the snow was his elderly mother, while far away in their homeland were his wife and young children. However, Oksana Yakovlevna did not hesitate. Son, go, save your family. She endured hard labor and survived the permafrost, ultimately returning to her homeland after completing her exile.
With her characteristic energy and optimism, Oksana Yakovlevna continued to actively participate in social and political renewal. She met with journalists, statesmen, and stateswomen and public figures, and spoke at public gatherings, defending and promoting the Ukrainian cause. In 1988, she addressed the Australian Parliament and participated in the World Congress of Free Ukrainians in the United States of America. Oksana Meshko successfully facilitated the regular publication and broadcasting of newsletters, memoranda, and statements collected by the Smoloskyp Publishing House into extensive volumes of materials from the Ukrainian Helsinki group using foreign radio stations. These bulletins aimed to protect individuals suffering under a totalitarian government that disregarded human rights, its own laws, and international agreements. On April 29, 1990, she opened the Congress of the Ukrainian Helsinki Union, which later evolved into the Ukrainian Republican Party, with the goal of advancing Ukraine's independence. That year in June, she also initiated the revival of the human rights movement called Ukrainian Committee Helsinki 90, and participated in the student hunger strike in the fall. She was part of the true vanguard for spiritual and national independence.
The revolution on granite was also supported by Neonila Kryukova, a well-known actress who staged performances banned in the USSR and was closely associated with the Sixtiers, including her work at the Slovo Literary Theater. In the mid-1970s, Nila produced 17 solo programs based on the works of Ukrainian writers, as well as one-woman shows inspired by Lena Kostenko's banned at that time poem Marusia Churai and Oles Honchar's novel Cathedral.
No encyclopedia in the world mentions Lachville, yet it exists in reality. Out of habit, the name sounds a bit strange, Lachville. In the old pre-industrial days, there was a large village here that made spears for the Cossacks. And perhaps a Cossack latched on and settled here, starting a dynasty.
Kryukova joined the revolution on granite in Kiev from the start, spending 2 weeks on the Maidan, reading poems and engaging with young protesters until she weakened from hunger strike. The actress was the eldest among the participants and was often listened to despite the differing views of the younger generation and the older generation regarding the future development of Ukraine. Later, Neonila Kryukova also participated in the Orange Revolution. In 2008, she was awarded the title Hero of Ukraine for her outstanding contributions to the Ukrainian state in the development of national culture and her inspiring artistic and life-affirming endeavors.
Wherever I look, leaders abound. Sons of the country, like gold, yet unsound. Hollow as vessels, in conflict they vie. O mother, prepare for a feast of lost life. Your own ottomans, in misguided embrace, will crucify you out of love, leaving no trace, blaming your deep and holy wounds on Moscow hand. I do not know for what my brothers were punished. In the snows of Mordovia, Altai's cold hush, in camps of Kolyma, their fates I don't ask. We live as if deaf, in silence we bask. No longer do I call for their unity's grace. If Taras can't move them, then they won't listen to me. These vessels, so vain in their glorious place, remain deaf to the cries of our history's plea. Let a stranger lash with us with wire and with pain, for only then will we rise from disdain. On this blind road to Golgotha, late as it seems, our leaders will gather and finally unite our dreams. Maria Kuzemko considers the vote for the Declaration of Independence of Ukraine to be one of the most important events in her life. She was one of 12 women who entered the Verkhovna Rada of the first convocation and served as the secretary of the Commission on Cultural and Spiritual Revival. According to Maria, a high-level commission from Moscow came to Ukraine at that time to persuade Ukrainian deputies to vote for the Union Treaty. There was talk of a firing squad, but 346 People's Deputies voted for independence. Was I worried before the vote? Yes, very much so. Would the communists support it? Would any of our people waver? After the vote, the joy was indescribable. I had never felt anything stronger in my life before or since. It felt like my wings had grown and I was flying above the ground, she recalls. Later, Maria prepared a draft decision on the rehabilitation of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic and autocephalous churches in the regional council. In the Verkhovna Rada, she became the author of amendments to the law on military service.
Levko Lukyanenko is rightfully considered one of the founders of Ukrainian independence. A native of Chernihiv Oblast and a lawyer by education, he was a human rights defender who spent nearly 27 years in prison on 2 occasions. He described his life as a post-Bandera struggle, enduring 45 hunger strikes, over 500 days of solitary confinement, and 72 days on death row. In May 1961, the Lviv Regional Court sentenced Levko Lukyanenko to death for treason against the Soviet motherland due to an attempt to create an underground party. At that time, and for the next 3 decades, there could only be one party, the Communist Party. After 72 days awaiting execution, his sentence was commuted to 15 years in prison. Lukyanenko was arrested again on December 12, 1977, for writing an appeal to the Belgrade Conference of 35 states regarding discrimination against Ukrainians. He went on hunger strike to protest his unjust arrest, refused to testify, and attempted to renounce his Soviet citizenship. The Chernihiv Regional Court labeled Levko Lukyanenko as a particularly dangerous recidivist and sentenced him to 10 years in prison and 5 years in exile. Levko left almost no memories of his personal suffering and did not like to talk about them. However, his camp life emerges through his descriptions of the fates of his fellow prisoners with whom he served time for anti-Sovietness. In February 1980, Levko Lukyanenko was transported to the Urals, to a specially built prison in the village of Kuchino.
Рушив поїзд далеку дорогу, сколихнувся вагон і помчав, і востаннє раз подивився на те весе, що так щиро кохав.
Through their agents in prison, the KGB spread rumors. that no one would survive unless they repented. These people did not return. Oleksandr died May 5, 1983. Yury Litvin and Valery Marchenko both died in 1984. Vasyl Stus died 1985, and other fighters for the Ukrainian cause. Released in 1988, Lukyanenko returned to Ukraine and engaged in human rights and political activities. As one of the leaders of the dissident movement, he was elected to the Verkhovna Rada of the Ukrainian SSR in March 1990 elections. In April, at the Constituent Congress, he became the head of the Ukrainian Republican Party.
He was a co-author of the Act of Proclamation of Independence of Ukraine, alongside Leontiy Sandulak, the first extraordinary plenipotentiary ambassador of Ukraine to Romania and founder of the People's Movement Party, and a distinguished scholar in histology, endocrinology, ecology, and valiology, doctor of medicine, professor, and author of 150 scientific works, including 5 monographs and a manual on human ecology. He was also a member of the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine. In 1991, Levko Lukyanenko ran for president of Ukraine, using his campaign to advocate for maintaining Ukraine's independence in the upcoming referendum. He finished in 3rd place. Thanks to the efforts of Levko Lukyanenko and his associates, in 1991, Ukraine became an independent state, effectively restoring its sovereignty, as our nation had achieved statehood several times in the 20th century.
In light of the mortal danger that loomed over Ukraine due to the coup d'etat in the USSR on August 19, 1991, and in continuation of the 1,000-year tradition of state building in Ukraine, based on the right to self-determination as outlined in the UN Charter and other international legal documents, and implementing the Declaration of State Sovereignty of Ukraine, the Verkhovna Rada of the Ukrainian SSR solemnly proclaims the independence of Ukraine and the establishment of an independent Ukrainian state. The territory of Ukraine is indivisible and inviolable. From this point forward, only the Constitution and laws of Ukraine hold authority within its borders. This act takes effect upon its approval. Please vote. The voting begins. The number 346 is displayed on the scoreboard. 346 in favor. The decision is passed.
The emergence of sovereign Ukraine was pivotal in the collapse of the USSR and the final dismantling of the communist, imperial, totalitarian system. Ukraine's independence remains a significant obstacle to Russian imperialism, which seeks to politically, economically, and spiritually absorb Ukraine. Today, in the face of ongoing Russian aggression, we continue to fight for its freedom and independence.
Our greatest achievement, which will endure through the ages, is our state independence. We regained our sovereignty and became the founders of the modern state of Ukraine. I am proud of my friends, alongside whom I embarked on the path of struggle against the KGB communist regime. Viktor Mohilny, Vitaly Shevchenko, Yuri Murashov, Vyacheslav Chornovil, Levko Lukyanenko, and dozens, hundreds, even thousands of brothers and sisters in arms who created the critical mass of the Ukrainian spirit necessary to defeat the occupiers and collaborators in Soviet Ukraine, said Oles Shevchenko, a member of the first convocation of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, co-organizer of student protests against discrimination against the Ukrainian language in the 1960s, dissident and political prisoner. He once answered a correspondent's question, "What do you think a successful Ukraine should look like?" With a concise reply, "Ukraine will be Ukrainian." Perhaps no words could express it better. Ukraine's independence was the result of a long and persistent liberation struggle, waged by the best sons and daughters of the Ukrainian people. However, today's realities show that independence and freedom are not given once and for all. They must be fought for and defended constantly, every day. Ukraine may have to fight again for another year or two or more. We must be ready to fight, for we, as a nation, have come to understand that freedom and state independence are invaluable. There is no idea in the world more precious than this.